Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Quests Expanded Cryptoforge. For starters, you'll need the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and Harmony. Finally, crypto weapons and armor are back, but these don't shoot meme coins or protect against rug pulls. This kind of crypto gear is made to incorporate technology usually used in crypto sleep caskets. If you installed Medieval 2 and felt disappointed by the lack of an icy approach to combat, now you have an entire quest chain you can embark upon to get your hands on these weapons once again. With the Cryptoforge, you're embarking on a quest chain that has 4 stages. You're getting a ranged and a melee weapon, a set of light and heavy armor, a brand new source of recreation, 2 temperature dependent insects, a boatload of new props, and the opportunity to recruit a unique character to your colony. If you've watched my coverage on the Generator quest or played it for yourself, the Cryptoforge leans slightly harder towards late game acquisition, with a more challenging series of quests and a higher demand for preparation and travel capability. At the time of recording, whilst I haven't covered the mod itself, I would still highly recommend using something like Vehicles Expanded if you intend to make liberal use of the Cryptoforge, as there is a time sensitive nature to use it when following this quest. The most sensible way of covering this mod seems to be to go through the quest chain itself and elaborate on the new parts as we come across them. So for those of you who like very clear timestamps, I'm sorry, but this video is going to be a little bit all over the place. If you're following along with these quests in your own game or intending to do them down the line, it should give you a much clearer picture of what to expect and how to prepare for it. The first thing to really note with the quest chain is, much like the Generator, it's designed to spawn the important sites around cold biomes. If you're used to playing in a perma-summer temperate forest and you've never really set foot in places like ice sheets, tundra, or even a boreal forest, this might be the time to dip your toe into the ice bath and mix up your playstyle a little bit. With that in mind, you'll likely want to be at a stage where your colonists are wearing at least recon armor before you venture out to do the final phase of this quest. Whilst parkas will help you against the cold, they're going to be awful at stopping damage. Equally, flak gear will bounce a hit or two, but it's not really going to help with any hypothermia buildup. Of course, if you're using something like Vanilla Apparel Expanded, you can always get around that with scarves and gloves.
I can't feel my fingers anymore. They're numb.
Ooh. Maybe you should wear these extra gloves. My hands are starting to get sweaty.
You're automatically given the quest for the first step of the Cryptoforge chain after 30 days from starting your run, similarly to how the Generator worked. This quest is going to involve scanning for the Cryptoforge parts, and again, similarly to the Generator, you're going to need to put in some pretty serious travel to get there. It's why it's beneficial to use the Vehicles mod alongside these quests, or at the very least, tame some horses or have transport pods ready to go. This first site that you visit is going to contain 2 scanning relay stations located inside the base that you need to use to discover the locations of the Cryptoforge bow and stern sections. The station itself isn't entirely defenseless, it's surrounded by a minefield as shown by the numerous frozen warning signs, and it also has a handful of shielded turrets. These are near identical to a standard mini turret, but they offer more cover thanks to the ballistic shield, and to make up for that, they drink more power. Thanks to this accelerated power consumption, you can just wait out the defences if somehow you didn't bring weapons that could just outrange them, or if you aren't in the mood to charge headfirst into gunfire with shotguns. Just be aware that with the amount of batteries on site, it takes approximately 3 days for them to deplete. Given that they only fire out to 29 tiles though, even a simple bolt action rifle will let you handle them without any issue. Now, let's assume that you've destroyed or waited out these turrets. It's time to cross that minefield. To the best of my knowledge, there are no clues as to where these mines are. Even if you spawn them in via dev mode, you can't see any hint of them. There isn't a tiny visual of them peeking out of the ground, you can't click around to try and find the invisible object, they are just there. There is the option of basically pre-walking your path with frag grenades to try and trigger them, but it's going to take a while to ensure that the path is clear. So it's honestly not a bad place to make use of jump packs or leap abilities, although given how RNG works you can almost guarantee that the spot you pick to land will be a mine. So, you made it inside with minimal loss to body parts and only a few ouchies. Time to fire up the scanners. Now comes the next threat. Mechanoids will spawn for each scanner you activate, with their scaling seeming to work outside of your current wealth and threat. That means if you only sent a single colonist to explore this site, they're going to be seriously outnumbered. On the other hand, if you sent a very well geared strike force, it'll be a complete breeze for them. These scans do take time to complete, as shown by the small progress bar located over the top of each relay. If you bail on the map to avoid combat before these scans complete, you won't get the data that you need to progress, so sticking around and taking the fight is almost required. One nice part of this is that you do have the advantage of being able to hide inside the structure, and you can use it as a kill corridor, letting you bring the mechs within range that provide you with a far greater advantage, rather than trying to run across a minefield to fight things like pikemen or lancers. Once both of these scans are completed, you're given 2 quests to follow up on. It is best to stay inside the structure and reform your caravan to avoid having to cross the minefield again though, as your colonists will instantly hop over it and appear on the world map. Now, these parts of the Cryptoforge ship have scattered and crashed, most likely anyway, in the northernmost part of your world map, with typical generation settings leaning to them being located on either ice sheet or sea ice tiles. Given that these areas tend to have an average temperature of around -20 to -25 degrees, with extremes reaching all the way down into the -50s, you'll want to be well prepared for this trip. And there's going to be no foraging for food along the way as the biome doesn't support it. There's a reason very few players ever settle on or even visit these tiles.
I don't like snow. I hate being cold. I hate outdoor pursuits. I hate the idea that I've got to push my body to find the limit.
We'll visit the bow of the ship first. This place is absolutely littered with wreckage in various forms. Huge, large and standard chunks of twisted metal, hundreds of steel slag, as well as twisted plasteel, components and even advanced components too. Unfortunately, some of the ship hull sections are completely indestructible, meaning you either need to look for the fragile sections to break your way in, or you're going to have to walk the winding halls of the crashed ship to reach the prize of the black box that's held deep within the wreck. Of course, it's never going to be as simple as casually sauntering into a ship like this and making off with tens of thousands of silver worth of materials, so you'll find a new type of hive scattered around the exterior of the wreckage and absolutely saturated on the interior too. These frozen hives spawn 2 unique frozen bugs, ice crawlers and mega midges. Whilst their stats aren't anything crazy on the information panel, they get a buff on the health tab when exposed to a freezing temperature. Given the location of the crash site, everyone's nipples are going to be cut in glass, and these bugs are significantly more dangerous. Ice crawlers gain a movement speed and a melee damage buff, making it impossible to outrun them on snowy terrain. They're basically cold spellipedes in terms of their other values though, with very similar armor and health. Mega midges gain a smaller movement speed buff and no raw damage increase, but they have their melee damage cooldown halved. These are mega spiders wearing a centipede-esque overcoat, sharing armor and health values. For an example of how many enemies this map can generate with, when I first visited this area I was looking at 21 mega midges, 23 ice crawlers and 30 frozen hives, which can produce more bugs if you hang around for too long. Whilst a few chain shotguns and some smart positioning can soon sort this out, don't underestimate how easy this site is to be completely overrun at when you first visit it.
How many shells do you have in that gun?
I got 57 more goddamn rounds in this 4-round magazine.
If you manage to fight your way inside the bow of the ship, you do have the option of making your life a bit easier by restarting the crypto generator right in the middle of it. This thing uses 120 Nvidia cards all strapped together. It runs all day every day for 2 straight years before they get thrown onto second-hand electronic retailers and marked as barely used. As you would expect, something like this kicks out a whole lot of power, which restores not only lighting around the ship but also heat. This is going to raise the temperature enough for any remaining bugs to lose their combat buffs, and make it far easier for your colonists to clear out any remaining infestations, if they didn't already go totally apeshit at you for destroying one of their nests and then fight their way out of the ship to attack you. Of course, it'd also never be as straightforward as just restarting the generator either. Doing this is going to summon continuous mechanoid threats to the tile and start a 3-day timer before the reactor enters a meltdown state. That means if you want to use that source of power, you've got 3 days to grab as much of this loot as possible whilst holding off dangerous opponents. Here's where your starting location is important. There's more than enough materials on this site to build your own smelters and pod launchers. Realistically, you could throw down a handful of tox generators too and just skip over having to activate the reactor entirely. It gives you more time to work. All you need to do then is launch a little bit of chem fuel to the site, and you've got an extremely easy way to get thousands of kilograms of resources back to your base in a matter of minutes, meaning you don't need to abandon any of this potential loot. Provided your strike force is also willing to put in a little bit of work while they're there, of course. Food needs are going to be taken care of thanks to the hundreds of insect jelly that the nests will have dropped, and there are beds located on the ship too, so it's not a difficult ask. You can fill any gaps in the hull with steel walls and make steel recreation buildings to keep people happy. So let's move over to the stern of the ship now. This site again is littered with twisted metal, slag, plasteel, normal, advanced components, as well as also holding things like frozen rations and medicine, which is going to make it much easier to stay at the site for an extended period of time. The good news is that this site doesn't have a horde of insects living inside it. The bad news is that it's full of frozen mechanoids and houses defensive auto turrets around the outside too, as well as storing a bunch of shielded turrets within. If you get too close to these frozen mechanoids, they're going to burst free from their icy tombs and begin attacking you, with the pathfinding in the ship already being incredibly tricky because of all the twisted metal that's laying around. You might bump into one or two without meaning to. Even more punishing is the inclusion of the flash freezers. You're going to find these around the ship, spewing out temperatures so cold that I think it would actually freeze the very air itself. So whilst you aren't harassed by waves of enemies when visiting this site, because there's no reactor to turn on that triggers it, you will need to make yourself a small base of operations to work from if you'd like to scavenge all of these materials, preferably with a few heaters too to let your colonists get the feeling back in their hands and feet. Raids will turn up here eventually, just like any World Quest site if you hang around for too long, but it won't be anywhere near as punishing as the bow of the ship was. If you can find a way to stand the cold for long enough, it does really help to build a box around the flash freezers, so there's no risk of your colonist pathing past one, or having a mental break and deciding to stand in the same room as one for an hour. You really do want to make sure that you're grabbing all of the materials here too, as once you've studied the black box at this site, it's going to unlock the final stage of the quest, travelling to the legendary Cryptoforge itself.
And there was much rejoicing.
So here we have it. The reason that you installed this mod. The Cryptoforge workshop consumes an ungodly amount of power, with the reactor in the middle of the ship providing a great deal of it, but only lasting for 48 hours once started, meaning you want absolutely everything in place and ready to go before you hit the switch. Or you need to build a crapload of your own generators around the map to get this place up and running. Much like the generators before this, if you turn it on, you're going to be ringing the dinner bell to bring the mechanoids to your location, and once those 48 hours of power are up, this entire site is going bye-bye. This part of the ship comes with sleeping quarters, recreation, food, medicine, and potentially even a couple of smelters to help you break down all of the scrap located on this site. You'll also find, once again, components and plasteel aplenty, as well as piles and piles of gold. So let's talk about what we're going to be using these resources for, the crypto gear. This stuff can only be made at the Cryptoforge, and the workbench itself cannot be minified or rebuilt. You have the time that you're on this map, and this time only, to construct all of the gear that you can. You're going to have access to a melee weapon, a ranged weapon, and 2 suits of armour, medium and heavy. Let's start with the axe then. It costs 55 plasteel, 4 advanced components and 60 gold. All crypto weapons are named and have a customization menu, like expanded persona weapons do, so you can tweak them to your own personal preference and mix up the look across your colony if multiple people are using them. Now, these weapons don't exactly have mind-blowing armor penetration or damage, especially not when compared to another weapon of this tech level and price, like a mono sword, but you're not using them for the raw stats. What you're after is the unique condition that they inflict of crypto slowdown, the thing that happened to the market about 3 years ago. This effect lowers movement speed, reduces heat armor, and raises minimum comfortable temperature tolerance, meaning those affected by it are more susceptible to cold temperatures. For the purposes of cold damage, heat armor works both ways, in that it's protecting from both hot and cold sources, so it gets progressively easier to inflict cold damage with this reduction effect stacking. When crypto slowdown hits 100% at extreme, the target will burst into crypto freeze, which works like cold fire, inflicting frostbite rather than burns and spreading to nearby targets. It can be extinguished much in the same way that fire can, so colonists will pat it out if it spreads right next to them in the middle of combat. Now, most standard human-sized targets are going to be pretty much dead before they reach this severity. However, hardier xenotypes that feel no pain or reduce damage might tank hits for long enough to proc it, and large animals are also ideal targets for this effect. Once it's on a single target in a raid, you can typically leave it to do its thing and spread Crypto Freeze around the entire group. It's got a good habit of dropping people from low damage, high pain wounds rather than outright killing them. The same effect is tied to the damage from the Crypto Bolter too, with this costing 65 plasteel, 5 advanced components and 60 gold, so only one component more. The Crypto Bolter has a little bit more range than a Charge Lance, whilst it hits for the same amount of damage, with the same penetration, on the same aiming and cooldown times, for a lot less carry weight too. You can customize this in a number of ways, making it look like a crossbow or a straight up blaster, but that's purely cosmetic. It still does exactly the same job regardless of its look. Whereas the axe might have taken a few hits to get that severity up, the bolter will proc Crypto Freeze pretty much instantly, making for an exceedingly good kiting weapon, providing your enemy isn't using something like a sniper rifle or even a bolt action, which would outrange you. A small group armed with these bolters can easily spread Crypto Freeze across an entire raid in just a few well-distributed shots.
It took me 6 years of research to build my freeze ray. How do you high school dropouts keep making them?
Armor time then. You've got the standard crypto gear first. The helmet costs 1 advanced component, 35 plasteel and 300 gold, with the armor taking 5 advanced components, 55 plasteel and 600 gold, making it far easier to equip your entire colony with weapons rather than armor. But let's assume you're rolling in cash and can afford to make these. What stats are you going to get for this investment? The easiest comparison by far is marine gear. It's got the same part coverage, equal sharp and blunt values, but for the extra resources you're spending to build it, rather than going for standard marine gear, you're getting increased heat armor, better insulation and no move speed penalty on the main armor itself, although you are losing that slave suppression offset if that matters to you. As well as having all around solid defensive stats and allowing you to move freely, all crypto armor comes with a unique health effect, Crypto Bleed. This technology staunches bleeding, so regardless of how severe any accumulated bleeds are, there will never be a bleed out timer nor the risk of a consciousness drop due to blood loss. Of course, these wounds still hurt, and the colonist will drop from the pain, but this buff is also providing a mild anesthetic effect that lowers pain by 20%, allowing them to stay in the fight for just a little bit longer. Just be aware that taking this armor off someone with severe bleeds present will cause them to instantly erupt into a blood fountain. As you would expect, the heavy crypto armor compares to cataphract gear, with this helmet costing 1 advanced component, 50 plasteel and 300 gold. Then the armor itself needing 8 advanced components, 160 plasteel and 1000 gold. So if you thought normal crypto armor was expensive, it's kinda got nothing on this. The helmet isn't actually that much more though, so you could easily justify spending a little bit of extra materials to get the better protection on your head. Just like normal crypto gear, this heavy stuff is going to match Cataphract's sharp and blunt values over the same areas, whilst providing more heat armor, far greater insulation, and once again, no move speed penalty. Not to mention that crypto bleed status. As to where you're putting this stuff together, you'll be glad to see that the Cryptoforge isn't just a single building. You're going to have multiple to work at, with them also being surrounded by additional structures that will buff work speed, like Sub-Zero hammers, prototype benches, Aether pressure tubes, and infusion coils, all of which results in a final work speed value of 400%. So if you throw a decent crafter at these stations, they will absolutely breeze through the bills. Fortunately for you, there's always a decent crafter not too far away, resting in one of the only viable Crypto Sleek caskets on the ship. This is the unique character for the mod, and they come in with Child of the Forge and Legendary Blacksmith backstories, making them a very powerful crafter. So fingers crossed they were over the age of 18 upon generation for you, and you don't get screwed out of that adult backstory stat bonus. As well as instantly joining your faction, they're also going to be wearing a legendary suit of heavy crypto armor and suffer from the unique health effect of guilt, which is understandable given that they are the only remaining survivor of their entire faction. Guilt progresses quietly in the background. It starts at lingering, which lowers mood by 8 but increases global work speed by 10%. The progression of this guilt effect is slowed by having the character perform work that they have a burning passion for, usually crafting given their background. This eventually reaches a stage of growing remorse, which doubles that mood debuff but also doubles the work speed buff. From here it progresses again to deep regret. This time mood is lowered by 28 and it's a 40% increase to global work speed. So whilst it does make for incredibly fast work, progressing through these stages of guilt, they're likely going to be experiencing mental breaks anytime they don't have a catharsis buff up. It later becomes crushing guilt, which is minus 44 mood for a 60% buff to work speed, then tormenting sorrow, minus 60 mood for 80% work speed. The final stage is despairing isolation, minus 80 mood for a 100% work speed buff. With all of these stages sounding like an early 2000s song title, you'll be happy to hear that it does eventually go away. Upon reaching 100% progression, guilt becomes acceptance. Now, this condition doesn't just disappear overnight, and it's hard to say exactly how long it will take, given that any work conducted during this time is going to change how fast it progresses. So if you plan on keeping this character around, be prepared to deal with their pretty serious breakdowns for quite some time.
It looks like he may commit suicide. Suicide is badass.
No.
That just leaves us with the odds and ends of this mod. Depending on the spawn that you receive for your Cryptoforge map, you may find that you have ancient blueprint benches present. These benches can be studied to grant a crafting inspiration, which is pretty awesome to ensure that you're getting the very best gear you possibly can from these limited time craftables. If you're able to make use of ideology rolls as well, the production specialist works on top of this. It's even better. You'll also find an ancient wargaming table at the Cryptoforge too. This provides a brand new type of recreation as well as being the only source of gaining it, so you're going to want to bring this home with you when you leave the Cryptoforge and put it somewhere safe. If a drop pod raid happens to land on top of this, well, that's just kind of it, unfortunately. Something to mention with any mod like this that involves such a highly specific generation of quest sites is the potential problems that can arise if you're using something like geological landforms, or playing with a highly tweaked world map. Say if you've generated it with loads of independent islands that are normally inaccessible. If the tile the quest lands on happens to be a large lake or a lone mountain, or is completely cut off from your main base by a large expanse of water, there's not really a lot you can do besides dev mode and cheat it a little bit. It's obviously not an ideal solution, but it's all you've really got to work with. There are also going to be a fair few of you out there saying,
That's it? What about all the other crypto stuff that was in Vikings?
Or,
Nah, I don't want to have to craft all the gear at the quest site. Why can't I bring some of it home with me?
well, fear not. Other mods already exist and have you covered. Crypto Weapons Restored brings back the shield, rifle, pistol and the war casket weapon, as well as including the Mjolnir strike targeter and the previously unused crypto shotgun. If you're wondering about the original crossbow and axe, they've chosen not to include those legacy versions of them, given how much more involved the new bolters and axes are with the main mod. To build your own Cryptoforge at home, you'll want Cryptotech Craftable. This allows you to analyse the forge and obtain the tech prints to recreate both the bench and weapons back at your own base. Of course, it's still going to be crazy resource intensive, but if you want to throw all the loot back to your base from the forge, then you've got a much longer, less stressful time frame to work with. Overall, this is a solid quest mod. I will put it above the generator in terms of something I'm more likely to use, as the steps with the Cryptoforge are less arduous and the rewards feel far more worthwhile. Even if you aren't using the crypto gear itself, the loot that you earn from doing these runs is amazing. The generator, on the other hand, was almost the complete opposite. You basically give yourself a huge resource sink to work with that's entirely thematic in nature. The Cryptoforge is still thematic, sure, but I don't think you will build a colony around it in the same way that you would the generator. You just use it to get your hands on some of the unique gear and mad wealth. If you'd like to see the current suggestion list for more mod rundowns, it's available to view on my Patreon page. All the posts there are totally free to read, it's pinned at the very top. You can support me in producing content like this for just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits of these videos and it does help me to stay alive. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you would like to see a full breakdown for, or any suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.